Welcome to Talk Around Riyadh, the Wheel of Time showcast. I am your host, Joe Perry, here with my co-hosts, Jen Isgro and Tom Kokoza. Welcome back, Jen.
I'm back. I'm so happy to be back from parts unknown. I missed you guys last week, but I am really excited to be back for this week's wow, I can't even talk, so obviously it's good that I'm back. This week's topic is what I was trying to say. I'm excited about being back for this week's topic.
This is what happens when you take a week off, Jen. You
I know, I
fall
just
out of
forgot how to
rhythm.
speak.
How you doing today, Tom?
I'm doing well, Joe. I'm excited to have Jen back as well
Yeah, it
because
wasn't the same. It didn't feel right last week.
no, the rhythm was off definitely, and we've established as many times you are by far the most talented person on the show, Jen. So
No, thank you
when you're
very
not
much.
here, it suffers greatly. Um, so just a quick aside, the ongoing dramas of the couches in my house.
Oh, well, wait, I missed last. Could you give me a quick recap of last week's drama?
Tom got new couches. That's the
No, I
drama.
know.
That's all.
Oh, I thought there was like
No,
different.
no, no. The drama was just they're in. That's it.
Okay.
So
Very dramatic.
I've got right. I've got two young children, um, and I had my last set of couches for about 10 and a half years before we got rid of them. Right. My goal was for these to last two, which seems to
Two
be
years?
they seem to they have it took them 3 days to figure out how to take off every cushion from the couch and just
God.
jump on the frame that supports them. Like, it's not fun to jump on the cushions anymore. Let's take those away and directly destroy the couch. So,
Oh yeah,
uh,
I would definitely explode on the children.
yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say you could say no.
Oh,
That
I've said no
Oh
many
no,
times.
it would
You
get
could
to
tell
me
them-
like
you could
physically
tell them not to do
restraining
that.
them from the couch.
Yeah, so my older son has been banned from one of the couches. We've had it for a week. 4 of the days he's been banned from touching the couch. Like, if this is in the floor, whatever.
Where do they get this, Tom? This rebellious nature from?
I don't know. I'm such
Or
a
this
rule follower.
blatant disregard for couch respect?
It's just so. My younger son just really, really enjoys when I get angry. Like, it's so fun for him. Like, he
Yeah.
loves it.
God.
So
That's
he's the
bad
kind of
news.
he's the kind of person he knows when I'm in work and I'm in a meeting and I look like really tense or I'm having a really difficult conversation with somebody, he runs over and he turns off the power to the router.
Oh yeah, he
Oh
did
my
that
God.
on the meeting the other day, right?
Right. So and he just to see me lose my mind, he thinks it's hysterical. So yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I think I want to whatever. I'm Italian, and as a kid, I never understood why old Italian grandmas like wrap their couches in plastic, like turn the couch from being comfortable to not being comfortable. But now I 100% understand.
But they're
These
not
children
spilling
want to
things on
ruin
the
the
couch,
couch.
though,
Yeah.
right? It's more of them smashing the couch.
They took Play-Doh
Oh my God.
and just tore it up like you're ripping bills off a roll and just flicking it on the couch.
Did they smush it into the couch cushions?
They tried to before that. I jumped. You guys know there's a cutout between
Yeah.
my kitchen and my living room. Like, it's a half wall. I just jumped over the wall. Get it? Yeah.
I wish we had some video of
Yeah,
that.
that'd be worth seeing.
For sure.
So
Are we
that's what's happening with me.
are we ready to talk some Wheel of Time?
Sure.
I think it's time for another edition of Where's What Origins. So get ready for it. But Jen, there might have been some breaking developments while you were out. Jen maybe was on a mission. I wonder how many people skip through that now. Um,
Nobody's
welcome back to
Not that
another.
long.
Welcome back to another edition of Where's What Origins. Jen, you were away for a week. The people want to know: were you on a mission to find What Origins, and what did you find?
Joe, I searched high and low for 2 weeks straight, barely eating, drinking, not sleeping very much. The stress level was high, but I'm back here now to report I still could not find What Origins.
Tom, you look disappointed.
I am Joe. I have an update. It's not good news. As of this moment in time, What Origins is still not on my television.
No. But you know what? We've got something even better. We've got Origins of What. How's that sound?
Sounds
Too
pretty good.
confusing, way too confusing. Why did they name them
Is
both
that something I could
Origins?
interest you in?
Yes, but why? Whose decision was it to name the show the same name as the book that's coming out?
I don't know, but there's our Where's What Origins segment for the night. All right. We do have a little bit of news to talk about. Not
What's that?
Something's wrong.
what's wrong.
The sound. I don't know what happened when you played the other song too. It sounds like you're underwater for a second.
Oh, I don't know.
I'll see how it sounds on the recording. Maybe it'll be fine on your
Yeah, I
end.
heard like
Maybe it's just me and Tom's hearing
Maybe
it.
yeah, it might be the feed into you guys. That might I don't know. But anyway,
Oh, man.
if it didn't come out good, I can just place it into the recording. So
Okay, good.
anyway, I do have a little bit of news to talk about. Not necessarily directly Wheel of Time news, but it does affect Wheel of Time. And Tom's the one who was able to find these two articles. The first one I'll talk about is a Deadline article about some new brass over at Amazon Studios. So the title of the headline of the article is Amazon Studios Vernon Sanders sets new original content executive structure with teams led by Laura Lancaster, Nick Pepper, and Lauren Anderson. So, what does that mean? No idea. How does this affect Wheel of Time? I don't know. Tom, your thoughts on this?
Well, Joe, I think in general it's good news for Amazon Studios. From from the article I read, and it's on our Discord server. If you want to take a look at it, um, it really shows that Amazon Studios, I think, is investing. It's starting to get a clear direction. I think a lot of what they've done as they started off has been like, okay, we have some tentpole features that we're going to try and bang out, and then everything else just throw it at the wall, see what sticks. And I think now they're really trying to say, okay, we're going to have like three main areas of focus. We're going to have three people lead those areas of focus. I think that's really good, and I think it's a good kind of like a more organized business plan, and they really kind of are staking their claims on like the entertainment industry.
Yeah,
I like that.
there's a mention here that they're working on and I had to learn a lot of these acronyms. I understand how people feel when they get acronyms, right? So there's three parts of the organization. They talk about SVOD, which is subscription video on demand, which I guess is all of the regular Prime stuff that you get when you pay for the Prime subscription. There's AVOD, which is ad video on demand, which I don't think they have right now. I think that's something new, right? They're going to start doing some free, I guess, free stuff, but it's going to have ad content in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then Fast, which I don't know if I got. So Fast is, and I don't know if this was the right definition that I found, but it says it's fast channel switching. Users can easily switch from one stream to another with very little delay. I don't know if that's the correct, because once you type in fast, it's hard to get the definition. So
That's true.
yeah, so it's fast channel is a place where people can consume video content, usually through linear or on-demand programming, without paying a recurring subscription fee. Fast channels can be viewed or connected TVs. and mobile devices, making them extremely convenient. So I
Seems
think
like
I'm thinking,
cable.
yeah, I'm thinking of like those cable type streaming apps, like that show kind of live television. Like if you go onto Pluto TV or something, where
Yeah,
it's
they have all the different channels.
yeah, and it's like
And it's just one show constantly
yeah,
kind of
or
thing.
yeah, two shows, yeah, or yeah, things like that. I'm guessing that that's what that is. So it looks
It's too
like
good.
they're definitely broadening their horizons with what they're doing. Now, there was no mention of Jennifer Salke in here, so I'm guessing that Vernon Sanders reports to her. They didn't
Yeah.
mention her at all because I know she's like the head of Amazon Studios, all of Amazon Studios, I think. So,
So there's one thing that I'm going to say I wasn't thrilled about in this article. Well, I think it was overall good news for Amazon Studios, and I like the kind of. It's not only that it's not only I think that they're tracking like different ways of distributing content, but they're trying to. They are, if you read deeper the other, they're trying to focus on like what do we do well, what do we want to do well.
mhm.
So like, what are we producing on our own? What are we producing in tandem? Where are our strengths? Where are our weaknesses? So they talk about like they have a lot of action dramas. They have young adult adaptations, whatever it is. And then, but when they talk about like their big like tentpole things, right? They list off about like an internal email that was distributed to their team, right? So this is internally amongst themselves. Hey, this is what we're great at. This is what we're gonna do. This is what we're
Yeah,
gonna focus.
Deadline got a
Blah blah
copy
blah.
of their email.
There's no mention of Wheel of Time, right?
No.
So that was a little bit of a bummer for me.
They didn't mention
Um,
that many.
No, well, I'll list off what they do mention. This is an
Yeah.
internal email. The terminal list, Bosch
Well,
Legacy,
wait,
and
wait.
Reacher.
I think it's you need to put this in context. So
Right.
maybe
So
read the whole email,
all right. So I'll read this part. So
or
this
at
is
least the
this
first
is the
paragraph.
email,
Yeah.
right? Fellow colleagues, we're on the precipice of a truly incredible moment for Amazon Studios. It has been a year filled with tremendous success of our critically acclaimed and crowd-pleasing new and returning series, including, to name a few, action-packed dramas, The Terminalist, Bosch Legacy, and Reacher, YA adaptations, The Summer I Turned Pretty, and High School, culturally relevant comedies, Sprung and Harlem, unscripted Emmy winners, Lizzo's Watch Out for the Big Girls, and Judy Justice, and genre tentpole The Boys, an epic fantasy event series, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. With this momentum, we are poised to deliver even greater value for our customers, prime and non-prime. Right, so that speaks to like, and they go on. It goes on from there. But I was really disappointed because that is like I don't know, 14 different shows that they mentioned.
Yeah, but
Uh,
Wheel of Time probably would have been like the third one mentioned of the Lord of the Rings boys
The epic fantasy
list.
event
Yeah, like you can't say that all
series.
those shows are better than Wheel of Time because they're all in different genres.
I think they're trying to just say the different
name like the
the
top
No, I
two
diversity
understand.
for
of their
each genre.
shows.
Yeah.
But yeah, I noticed it too that it wasn't there.
I think I guess internally, however, I whatever. However, there are rumors or there's innuendo that people were not particularly thrilled with how the Lord of the Rings of Power performed.
Oh, it's not
Uh,
rumors. It's no. It's a fact. Supposedly, the showrunners are gonna be kind of demoted, and
right.
they're bringing new people to run the show.
Internally, they're still looking at that as like, well, this is our biggest thing, and
Yeah.
our
So by the
you
way,
know
too, I
our
thought it was kind of funny. This Vernon Sanders, his title is head of television. I think it's odd that a streaming service is saying head of television when I mean, yeah, a lot of streaming service is watched on television, but it's not. A lot of it isn't watched on television. It's watched on phones and compute like laptops and tablets. Just the fact that they're still calling it head of television
Yeah.
sounds a bit behind the times.
I think it's like considered the art form, right?
Why don't they call it the head of streaming?
It's not streaming is technology, right? I think television is considered like uh it's considered the art form, right? Like
Oh,
the
the art
television
form.
is like is
It's gone from a
it's like
physical
cinema,
box.
right? You call it cinema. It doesn't make a difference whether it's a Michael Bay film,
Film.
or
You call it film.
film
even
with a
even though
capital F,
even though nothing's
film.
really on film anymore.
Right.
Um. Okay. I want to move on to a little bit more of an interesting story, and I think that's more directly related to the Wheel of Time. And this one is an announcement on Variety that Carnival Row will end after its second season. I had no idea the second season still hasn't aired. It feels like that show came out like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But
It
it was canceled. They don't say canceled in here, but let's be real. It was canceled. So the second upcoming season is going to be the last season. Why I think it's so important to talk about is when the second season is going to air and how it's going to air. First off, it got 10 episodes, which was
Yeah.
which was a change. It was originally 8 episodes, so I don't know if they just gave it 2 extra episodes because they were like, this is going to be the last season, we'll give you 2 extra episodes. It's going to launch on February 17th, and it's going to be released 2 episodes a week over 5 weeks. So that goes February into the end of March.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is kind of around the time I was hoping The Wheel of Time would come out, but this leads me to believe that The Wheel of Time is probably coming out after that.
Yeah, I would think
It
so.
seems
Yeah.
very likely that The
Not
Wheel of Time is
before.
not going to come out. I don't think so anymore.
No way.
I had crossed my fingers and thought it might come out right after the new year, but I don't think so with this coming out February 17th, unless the Wheel of Time would take 5 weeks as well. You could theoretically fit it in from New Year's to the 17th.
No,
but
not the way that Rafe was talking at Comic-Con.
no,
It's not coming out.
I think it's coming out after
right
this.
after New Year's.
I don't
Yeah.
think it's going to be the summer because I think The Boys is going to be, although I don't know, it's like so long in between seasons now. It's ridiculous. I hate television or
Yeah.
streaming or whatever you want to call it. But
See? You called it television.
I still think late Q1, early Q2, like March, April.
I think it's early Q2 now. I think because this is going to run into the end of March. There's no way. I mean, even if it does come out March, let's see, February 17th. That gives us, so the 17th is a Friday. So that's the 17th, the 24th, the 3rd, the 10th, and the 17th of March. So it would be over by the 17th of March. So theoretically, Wheel of Time could come out the 24th or the 31st. It's possible. I would say maybe closer to the 31st. So I'm starting to think now, like this could be out while Jordan Con's going on.
Yeah. That's being mentioned in chat while we're talking too.
That means we have to
like
have
there's
a
going to be
watch party at
viewings and watch parties. That'd be really cool, but I would be upset if I'm sure Jordan Con would kind of be upset. Like we were going to do panels about these, hoping that these episodes were out already so we could talk about them. But
Jordan Con is over before the episode. Oh no, it comes out on. Why am I thinking it comes out on Sunday? I'm getting confused. Right, it would come out right before Jordan Con.
If it's the same schedule, it'll be out Thursday.
Friday.
I don't know what they're going to do because Wheel of Lord of the Rings was coming out at midnight on Eastern time.
On Fridays.
Yeah, but
right?
remember the Wheel of Time was coming out like 8 o'clock
like
or 7 o'clock on
Thursday
Thursdays.
Nights, it was coming out midnight Greenwich Mean Time.
Yeah, so I don't know what's going to happen. It's very possible that Jordan Con's going to be, going to be going on while season 2's airing. I don't know. I don't like it. But you know what? Hopefully the season will be over before WatCon.
That's true.
So what are your thoughts? You guys think, does this change your thoughts about when you think the show's going to come out? It certainly changed mine.
Yeah, I kind of thought it was going to be March, April, so I think it's the same as what I thought before. But I don't know, do they like to leave like a couple of weeks in between? Or would it not matter?
I don't know what they
have
think
no
of this
idea.
show. If they think this is a big show for them. I mean, it's got stars in it.
Well, it's
Yeah.
canceled, so I don't think they think it's
Well,
a big show. It wasn't. I watched
When did they film
few
this?
episodes. So here's the thing, too. I'm just reading here. Production. So it was affected by COVID, but it was forced to shut down. Production did not officially end on second season until September 2021. So this is. We're talking a year and a half after the show finished production that the episode's coming out.
Didn't I'm not gonna say her name wrong, but Cara Delevingne, didn't she have like some kind of not a scandal, but wasn't she like having a breakdown or something. And am I not? She's the one. She's in Only Murders in the Building, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna look that up. I feel like something happened with
I-
her recently. I mean, they're still gonna release it, obviously, but yeah, I don't know. I thought that there was.
I know nothing about her as a person other than I think she dated Saint Vincent for a while.
I think
Uh,
production, and when they say production ended, I'm assuming they meant filming, not like post production.
yes, that's production.
Yeah. So
yeah.
so this is we're talking a year and a half almost from when the filming ended to when they're actually airing the show. Now I don't know if that's because scheduling they had like we have Lord of the Rings and we have this, so we don't want to run it alongside those, or was it because they were debating
Well,
whether to even air the episodes and say screw it, or did they go back and say, hey, we're canceling the show, wrap it up, so we're gonna have to go write a couple more episodes to kind of wrap up the storyline.
no, I think it was. I think they really got hit with the SFX like post COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Post COVID, but like post COVID like delays in SFX that like the entire industry is dealing with. Like there was so much backlog of work that needed to be done, and there were so many fewer workers doing it that a lot of things just got delayed because they couldn't get the effects done in time. And I think that they kind of hit like they were ready right as like all those slowdowns happened, and so it took them a lot longer to get it done.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, theoretically, it
yeah,
real time could run alongside it, but I don't think they'd put two fantasy type
no, I don't think they
shows
No.
would do
on at the
that.
same time.
I feel like
Uh,
if Wheel of Time doesn't come out by the summer, then like just release it in November again. Who cares? Like
Oh
just
my
it's gonna
god,
be like 2 years. Like it's like two
I,
years you're gonna have in between. This is ridiculous.
it is ridiculous.
Like how do you expect to keep up an audience for a show like this?
You all have millions
Not
of
like Lord of the
dollars,
Rings, where
Amazon.
like you don't forget about Lord of the Rings. Like there's people out there that are gonna forget about this show.
well, I mean, there's a lot of talk out there, not like just across everywhere, that like, hey, 18 months is like that's what you're going to see now between seasons of
Ugh.
shows. Like the post production work, the production values are expected to be so much higher now that if you're going to treat it like a film, it's going to take that amount of time for new television to go out.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, and
um,
it's only eight
They should like
episodes.
take
It's
no breaks.
ridiculous.
Take like a month break and then go back. That's it.
they
Keep
No, they
didn't
going.
just
take
need
a
to do a
break.
better
The only break
job.
they took was to do to really do like publicity, right?
Well, I don't
And then
think
they
that's
were
the
like,
problem. I think the problem is they're freaking working on too many shows. There's too many different shows going on. Like, stop putting out 500 shows where 490 of them are crap, and you're wasting all of the post production people's times on crap when they could be working on good content and putting it out more frequently or on a more timely basis.
well, they got rid of countable roles, so
Yeah,
they're
I
not going
guess
to
so. Maybe
interfere.
that'll help with
That's one down.
stop spending $1 billion on the Lord of the Rings and be better, be smarter. I don't know. Whatever. Now I'm angry.
So, well, if I
Good.
could be even a little bit more depressing in regards to this, because the
No, I don't
first
want to
thing
hear
that
any more of it. Can we talk about Origins of Wheel of Time, or do you have to be more
all
depressing?
right, fine,
Let's get happy.
let's get happy.
We've got a new book, a new Wheel of Time book. While it's not
Yeah,
uh, what's it called? A
a
novel
narrative.
type book, a narrative. It's Wheel of Time content, and there's new content in here.
Hmm.
Are you excited? Were you excited? What did you do?
Yeah.
What happened when you got the book? Tell me your experiences of receiving this book and what you did when you got it.
Um,
Tom's looking at me like,
I opened the package from Amazon. I looked at it. I caressed the cover.
did you smell it? Did you give it a good whiff?
I didn't smell it because it probably smells like paper, right? What does it
Yeah,
smell like?
that new paper smell,
Smell like?
new clean printed paper.
Yeah. So and then
No, you got to open
I
it up and stick your nose in
okay,
there.
I'm
Get it in
sorry,
there
sorry,
good like
sorry,
this.
sorry. Sorry, wait.
Yeah, there you go.
You look like you're hiding from the cops.
Yes.
Oh, it does smell good. You're right.
Yeah. See.
Yeah, and then I started reading it. Not immediately, but pretty soon after.
Tom, do you want to share
I
or
had to
no?
open it immediately. Uh, so yeah, where I um when I got home from what was it on Tuesday? I got it on Tuesday.
Yeah, it was Tuesday, Tom. That's when the book came out.
Yeah, so I got it on Tuesday. I was like, did I get a package? I'm supposed to get a package. Where is it? And I came home from work. So come home from work, see the kids, say hello, all the rest of that. But yeah, I ripped over the book. I did because I'm nothing if not a total shill. Did take a moment to take a photo and post it on social media on our
Saw
account
that.
to say that I was about to start reading it, and then I dove in, and I will say, I really am trying to not read it in a day.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to pace myself with it to give myself a little bit of time to relish, I guess.
Bask in the glory of the book. Ruminate.
Yeah, I mean, we've been looking forward to this for the better part of, but I guess the better part of a year. Um, and um, I didn't want it to be over in like a day. I didn't want to be like, oh, it's done.
Mhm.
You know. Also, like I knew we were going to be talking about it a lot, so let me take my time and really absorb what we're reading.
Yeah. I hear you too, man. I was like, I wanted to read the whole thing, and I'm like, I went past what we're going to talk about today, but then I was going back and reading stuff again. Like I was rereading it before I even finished it, which is odd. I've never done that before. Um, but yeah, I'm excited. I opened it up looking at like the cover, the origins of the Wheel of Time, and then the first thing I get to, I'm like, oh, it's 4 chapters. Interesting. Um, I wasn't expecting that. Actually, I'm not gonna lie, I was expecting that. I talked to somebody who had the book already last week, and they told me that, but still, I didn't believe them until I saw it. And then I opened up to that page of the map, and I remember Michael Livingston mentioning that we were getting a new map. And
Mm-hmm.
I sat there and I stared at the map for a good 15 minutes looking at it. And it's the first thing I want to talk about because one, I love maps. I think I would say that the map in the Hobbit book, my dad had this, or he still has it. I shouldn't say he had this. My dad has this edition of the Hobbit. It's like a green hardbound um,
Oh yeah.
edition in the box. And I actually bought the same edition later on. Like I bought it off of eBay, and it had the map in the beginning, and that is what first made me want to read the book. I opened it up and I would
Mm-hmm.
sit there and look at the map and be like, this is so cool. It's got a map, and I'm like, look at all these places and whatnot. So I have like a really sentimental connection to maps in fantasy books specifically. So when I see like a really crappy map in a fantasy book, it really turns me off and I don't want to read the book. So that, for all of you people, authors who write fantasy, make sure you got a good map in there, or just don't put a map in. If you're not going to put a good map in or put some effort into it, then don't even bother including it because it's just going to disappoint. So we've got a map of the entire world.
It's true.
I forgot to look at the map. I'm looking at it for the first time right now,
Jen,
guys.
Oh my
you're off the
God.
I forgot
podcast. Get
that he
off.
said there was a. I read. I went straight to the words. I forgot that this was a new
I
map,
went straight to the words.
and now I'm looking at it right now. And Randland is really, really small.
Well, yeah, it's the map of the whole continent. So this is
I
kind of
know.
cool. And I have to say, from just like looking at some of the other maps online of the Wheel of Time, this is like a very different aspect ratio or perspective because Sean Chen is a lot bigger
Yeah.
than I thought,
Yeah.
or other maps depicted it as. It's enormous, and it makes the Westlands look tiny and minuscule
So
and,
small.
and insignificant. But we were talking about, when we were talking about Sean Chen, we were talking about the Northern Blight and I think we had talked about whether the blights were connected, and we were debating that. And apparently, the Northern Ice Cap does connect the continents together. The
Yeah.
Sean Chen continent and then the main continent, which doesn't really have a name, but the one that holds the Westlands, the Waste, and Shara.
Yeah.
So
Why does every continent have a name except like the one we're reading about? That's weird, right?
yeah,
I
I
would
don't
say
know,
this is a
because nobody
map.
could agree on a name.
Yeah, the map was like everything that we're filtered, like every piece of information we have in the series, for the most part, is filtered through people who live in the Westlands, and they don't live in a country. They don't live in a continent. They live in like an individual, like country or city state. That's it, right? So there isn't that sense. Like I'm sure if you were in Shara, like you would have more areas defined than just Shara, you
Right.
know? But
Yeah, I like this because it's and well, the one other thing too I noticed was it said the Madlands, right? Is that the Isle of
yes.
Madmen?
Yes.
So it's called the Madlands here. So I don't know why the name is different. I'm not quite
Um,
sure about that part. Um, but
so
yeah, it took me
I don't
took me a
want
minute
to
to
it
figure
may
that
it
part out.
may it may be in the series itself, but I know Michael Livingston has kind of addressed that in some interviews that he's done about this series, about how that was one of the changes that he made when he was discovering like working through the map.
Yeah, I wonder how Rob Christensen feels now about this new map that came out because his is good and it's actually better than the ones I've seen, but it's still a little bit disproportionate. I think actually it's pretty close. It's closer than the other maps I've
It's
seen.
pretty damn good.
It
Yeah.
is. I'd say the main continent might should be a little smaller and closer to Shanshan, but um, I like it a lot, and it kind of puts in perspective when we're talking about Shanshan just how big. Right? Somebody said I think when we were recording that episode that there was a rebellion or some sort of battle in one of the provinces that involved 2 million people, and I was like,
Right.
that's a large battle. Has there ever been a
Really large
battle of
bottle.
that size before in human history that we know of?
Yeah, I don't know how many. I don't know what the largest ground force battle.
It wasn't 2 million people, I'm sure.
I don't know how many people were. If you consider the entirety of the Western Front in World War I, like how many soldiers were on both sides. I don't know. I don't
Okay,
know what the numbers.
but that wasn't. I don't think that was a single battle. But I don't know. Maybe we're just
I
misinterpreting it.
I still can't believe that no part of Shanshan broke off from the rest of Shanshan. Meanwhile, like the Two Rivers is like dead smack in the middle, and it got lost, and like no
Well,
one goes there or knows about it. Like
so I think from what Joe said, like people have tried to do it, but the way the Shanshan Empire is set up is that they don't let anybody go.
they just like know every nook and cranny.
I don't know.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
don't
it is
know.
what it is, but
Yeah,
you know,
I think that's the best
looking
thing to
at it,
say.
it's huge.
It is what it is. Um, so we get a forward from Harriet, which we actually got. I listened to this because they had posted it on. Remember we talked about it. I think a couple episodes ago where they had released some clips from the audiobook version, and one of the clips was the forward from Harriet. She
Yeah.
talks about how she first met him, Michael Livingston, when he was asked to speak at Robert Jordan's induction into the South Carolina Academy of Authors Literary Hall of Fame. That's how they first met. And she liked his speech so much that she invited him immediately to do some other talks with Brandon Sanderson. And they kind of became friends and whatnot. And then, eventually, they had reached out to him to do this book. So um, I think listening to her reading it is better. That's what I'm gonna say. So if you have the audiobook, listening to her do the reading of it is actually really cool. Did you guys want to make any comments on that or?
No, none of the forward itself.
No.
And then we get into a letter to the readers from the author, which is just Michael Livingston really talking about his story, his origin story of the Wheel of Time, how he got into it, and when he was 14 years old, reading it in the bookstore, and then becoming hooked on it. Um, and it's kind of weird. There's a lot of like series of events that kind of seemed unlikely to happen, but that did happen. Um, so how he came to the Citadel and met Robert Jordan, and then he wanted to create a student writing award in honor of Robert Jordan and another author, and the other author introduced him to Robert Jordan, and that's kind of how they met. How he was Robert Jordan then invited him to tour to like come to his office and see what his office was like. And they gave him this might have been after Robert Jordan died, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think Harriet then invited him
Mhm.
to go visit Robert Jordan's office and told him he could take anything he wanted, like take one thing, and he took the dragon marked katana.
Yeah.
Which is so cool. And then it turns out that one of Livingston's students' father-in-law sold that katana to Robert Jordan.
Crazy.
Yeah, and then he got later. They gifted him the saber-toothed tiger skull. And then the desk was donated to the Citadel, and he had to move it into his office. And then Tor reached out to him to write this book, and he actually got to write this book sitting at Robert Jordan's desk in his office with the katana, with the saber-toothed tiger skull. So some of Jordan's things, which has got to be so surreal. I can't imagine that.
Yeah, the magic is real kind of vibe of the thing, the kind of repeated phrase or whatever. It's a very emotional beginning
Yeah.
to what may have, which could have opened in a very dry way. Sometimes you read books like this and it's very scholarly and that's it. And like obviously I don't think any fan has had quite that experience with the level of echoes and opportunities and places to cross over with Jordan, except for maybe Brandon Sanderson. But
Yeah.
I feel like that's like the vibe, the feel of that was like you could see yourself in that role. You could see the fan in him, and like the emotional through line that the story. I don't know, really.
I like how he keeps talking about like magic isn't real, and he keeps going back to that as he's getting like establishing these connections, and then he's like, magic is real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just like to say too, right? So some friends of ours from the community went to go to the book signing in Charleston. A bunch of them went together. I think they rented a house or something down there and went to the book signing. And they posted, there's Rob from Malkia Talks did a live stream of the book signing. There was a lot of pictures posted on Instagram and Twitter of them there. They got to sit at Robert Jordan's desk, which we were very jealous about. They were at the book signing. Harriet was there and Maria was there, and they got to meet them and hang out with them. So I imagine that's the closest thing I could think of to what Michael Livingston's experienced, and it's such a small piece of that. But that's got to be pretty crazy. So, and then he goes into his introduction, which he's just talking about the fans of the Wheel of Time and how much of a devotion the fans have to it. And he explains what this book is going to be about, how it's broken up into two parts. Right, the first part is about Robert Jordan himself, the biography and things like that. And then the second part is the glossary, which is revealing the, quote, real world of Wheel of Time, where he talks about the different things and where Robert Jordan drew upon them from the real world. And I say real world, but it's not real world because a lot of it's drawn upon other mythology. So it's not necessarily real stuff, but, things that come from our real world. And then he gives Tom, your favorite part was the spoiler warning.
Okay, so yeah, I don't want to be cheesy about it, but towards the end of it, he says spoilers abound, which is what we say at the end of every one of the show notes that we have for our episodes.
Do you think it's because he listens to our podcast and he was like, he stole that from you, Tom?
I don't think that's
confront him
why, but I don't think it's why, but magic is real, and I like the little bit of echoing that I saw there. It really made me feel nice.
Okay. So We're going to talk about the first two chapters, which are basically the first chapter really focuses on Jordan's biography, and then the second gets a little bit. The second chapter is not anything I expected. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about Robert Jordan's biography. Now, we knew some of the stuff I think we all knew already, but some of the stories that we hear in here are pretty extraordinary. And I wanted to ask you both if there was any in particular story or thing that you learned in this first chapter about Robert Jordan that either surprised you or you thought was, just kind of touched you in a more than some of the other things.
I have one line that I took out. I believe it was when he was in Vietnam, and he said in like the day room or wherever his group was, they had a sign that said, "Anybody can dance with the devil's daughter, but we tell her old man to his face." And that just sounded like something like a band with a red hand would like put in a song or something.
Oh
It
yeah,
just
that's very.
reminded
I
me
didn't
of
Very
even make
that.
the
good.
connection. That's very
Yeah.
much like Dance with Jack of Shadows.
Yeah. When I read it, I was like, oh, it just sounds like it could have slipped right into Wheel of Time, like with Matt and the band.
Oh, I didn't make that connection. Oh wow. I wonder if
I
that
wonder if
like
like yeah, a lot of like his friends and stuff like that like went into that, the band stuff. But I
yeah,
think
he
it's
didn't,
gonna be
at
somebody else.
least from the parts that we've read so far, I didn't hear him make reference to any of that, but I wonder if I'd love to ask him too, and I guess if we can ever talk to Michael Livingston or maybe get him on the podcast, I ask him things like, are there things in this book that he didn't explicitly tell us that have connections? Like something like that, Jen, where like he put that in there and he knows that's connected to the Dance of the Jack o' Shadows, but he just doesn't explicitly point it out just because he didn't
Well,
want to do that with everything he put in the book.
well, he does. I mean, Jordan said too that like sometimes he doesn't even realize that he was putting stuff. It's just like experiences he had that kind of went into the writing, and he didn't like specifically do it on purpose, but it was just in his head. So when he was writing it, it just went into the story. So it could have
Yeah,
been something like that.
yeah. I thought that I'm glad you mentioned that, Jen, because I totally didn't pick up on that. How about you, Tom? Was there anything specifically in chapter one about Robert Jordan that kind of stuck out to you?
There's a bunch of things. I mean, the RPG thing is ridiculous,
Yeah. Oh my God.
but
I, I,
for something with a little bit more pathos, because that's just like an insane story. Um, the part where Jordan's talking about his nicknames and
mm,
his nickname of Iceman, which comes from one of my favorite plays, The Iceman Cometh, and um, he talks about how there's like a picture of him
Mhm.
sitting down next to three dead bodies, just eating rations with a pair of chopsticks, and like it just they're just things that are there. Like it's completely doesn't like it doesn't affect him or bother him at all. It's just three dead bodies
yeah,
next to
he's
him.
just sitting there because there was a spot to sit for no
Right.
other
And
reason.
like there's no like he talks about how like that's like in order to get through something like that, you have to like cut off part of your humanity, and that's part of the struggle of coming back. Is like kind of can you bring that back? Can you get that back? And how do you cope with being so cavalier and nonchalant and accepting of just death all around you?
Hmm.
And I think that to Jen's earlier point, like that's something that is just in the books all over the place.
Hmm. The way,
Even if it's something that he didn't necessarily want, like say, I'm done, I'm gonna put this in. This is where,
Mhm.
but like, um, I think you see that as early as the Dragon Reborn, like where like people are just, oh, that person's dead, and that's okay because I have stuff
mhm.
to do,
The way he
and
tells
like,
that too, he tells it in the third person at first,
yeah,
Yeah.
like he's yeah, and then like you tell that now he's talking about himself. That person is him, but the way he
right,
tells it, yeah, that is yeah, that was it. Kind of very it's very like Apocalypse Now, um,
yeah, you
or
know,
no, maybe I'm thinking of Platoon actually. No, it's
they're
Apocalypse Now when they're sitting in the when they first go to Vietnam, and he meets Animal Mother, and he's got the dead Vietnamese guy, and he's saying, "Take a
Yeah,
picture with my friend. It's his birthday." Yeah,
bizarre.
yeah, very reminiscent of that. Um,
Hmm.
and I wanted to go back to the you mentioned the RPG story, right, where he shot down an RPG with his rifle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he tells that story, and he tells another story too about how his helicopter blew up, and I think he was the only one who lived, and he had to run through an ambush back behind enemy lines
Yeah, but not through
through the
like
jungle
he had
by
the
himself.
ambush was he was behind the ambush
Yeah.
and
Yes.
he ran past it
Yeah.
to get back to where he needed to be. Um,
And he talks about like medals and like the medals he won, and he's got a very like cynical outlook kind of on that, he talks about how the medals, they just give medal because I lived, because I survived. That's why I got a medal, because I survived.
Yeah.
And not
Right.
that he did anything heroic, he just kind of survived, and that's why he got that's why he got the medals. And it made me think like that story about the RPG and the story about the helicopter blowing up and to run through it. And I'm wondering, again, Livingston doesn't flat out say this, at least not at this part. I don't know if it comes up later, but I'm wondering if this kind of fed Robert Jordan's idea of Matt's luck,
yeah,
because that's
I
what I was
agree.
thinking about. I was like, oh my God, he's like Matt. I was like,
Yeah.
he's just like luck. So I'm wondering if
And
that kind of fed into that too. He's just like kind of escaping death. These like, near death experiences that he shouldn't have survived, that he did just on almost sheer luck. And he keeps saying like, it wasn't any skill. I didn't do anything heroic.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like talking like Matt, like I'm not a bloody hero.
Yeah.
And
I'm just trying not to die. That's
Yeah.
it.
yeah, and it resonated with me when he said that. And I'm like, oh my God, this is Jordan. Jordan is Matt, or he's channeling Matt's channeling Robert Jordan. He's writing about himself, at least in this aspect of it.
And like I did not research this. This is just from my memory. But like when Jordan was alive still, like I remember like him saying that like while and I hear a lot of writers say this, like I'm closest to whoever it is that I'm writing, I'm inside their head, blah blah blah. That like Matt was a character that he felt he had like a lot of similarities with. And at the time, me not necessarily getting that, right? I'm like, this is like a gambler, soldier, scoundrel, you know. But maybe this is what he was talking about,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. Um, Something else that kind of jumped out at me, not really anything related to Wheel of Time or whatnot, but I had no idea he was recruited to play football at Clemson, which is a huge
Yeah,
football school. I don't know if it was big that back then, but I mean nowadays Clemson's like a Division One, like they won the title, the national championship
yeah,
a
they're a
couple years
powerhouse.
ago. So
Yeah, I
um,
think it was still a big deal.
that's how he
You know,
mentioned about he was into sports. He played baseball, and I think I forget what the other sport he said he was, but football was his main sport that he played, and he actually got recruited to play there. Um, but he said it didn't end well at Clemson, and then he went to Vietnam after that. He enlisted in the army after that. So I'm wondering if there was no other information. I was kind of curious as to like when he said it didn't end well, like what happened.
I thought he was just saying something like he'd like never studied before. And then when he went to college, like managing playing sports and school, like he wasn't able to do it because he
Oh
never
yes, he did
knew how to
mention that.
study because he was just like smart his whole life and he never studied.
Yeah. Yeah, he mentioned how he could get like B and A grades without studying, and then
Yeah. So he
doing
probably just
this.
failed out of school and then enlisted or something.
Yeah, he took too big of like a class load while he was doing football, and he just couldn't, I guess,
Yeah.
balance the two of them.
Yeah.
And he said he didn't know how to study because he really didn't have to study.
Right.
But Tom,
Mhm.
I'm surprised you didn't bring this up because I know you appreciate this. Was like his reading. He started reading at a very early age, and he was reading like, adult type things
Yeah.
at the age of like 9 and 10.
yeah, he actually kind of had to like pretend to read younger books at times, and then he was reading, Jules Verne and Mark Twain novels when he was like 6 and 7 years old. I think that's, um, I've heard him tell the story before, or I've read him telling the story before of how he was reading something while he was recovering from from injuries, and he threw the book away saying I could do better than this, and that's what kind of spurred him to be a writer. And I had known already that he was a voracious reader and that he started to read very young, again from like maybe interviews that he had given. um but like I don't know. This kind of puts it in a different context, right? To see somebody who had brilliance from youth, was very athletic, kind of didn't get an opportunity to explore the athletic side of him, went to war, and was like dealing with how do I like reintegrate myself into society and put away like who I had to be to get through war. Uh, for that person to say, "Hey, like, I'm gonna write, I'm gonna create stories, I'm gonna like," that's a I don't know. I think it's a different thing, right?
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
He
I think
doesn't.
it's
Yeah, he
it
doesn't talk much
adds.
about it. He just says that he just kind of did it, right? He said, "I
Yeah,
had to put all that like behind me, all those experiences behind me, and be able to reintegrate back into into normal life," which is, I know it's like a very tough thing for veterans to do. But he enrolled, right? He enrolled in the Citadel and studied physics. I mean, how many people do that when they come back from war? And then he was
right.
working on what, nuclear reactors for the Navy.
Yeah, and submarines and stuff. His "take you this job and shove it" line to the U.S. government
Yeah.
uh is also something that jumped out at me from this chapter.
Oh yeah, didn't they said like you can't leave, and what was it?
"You'll never work for the government again."
Oh,
He said, "Can
yes.
you put that in writing?"
Yes. That's great.
Like that's how
Uh,
you, that's how
uh,
you quit a job.
that's exactly how you quit a job. I wanted to read a part of the book because um, Livingston mentioned that Robert Jordan was very closed about sharing any like direct correlations of his experiences in Vietnam, um, that were put in the books, and he does mention one specific one that Robert Jordan was, um, mentioned, and I'll just kind of read this. This is actually an excerpt from the book, so I'll start it off just reading what's in Origin. So, in the sixth novel of The Wheel of Time, the protagonist Rand memorizes the face of a young woman who died to protect him. Um, the maiden was straightening Desora's body. She had raised Desora's veil. She reached to stop him when he touched that piece of black algode, then hesitated, looking at his face, and settled back on her haunches. Lifting the veil, he memorized Desora's face. She looked as if she were sleeping now. Tesora, of the Musara Sept of the Rain Aiel. So many names. Leah of the Kasada Shireen, and Dalen of the Nine Valleys Tardad, and Lamel of the Smokewater Miagma, and so many. Sometimes he ran down that list by name. So this is something that this is an actual kind of experience that directly correlates to something that he put in the books. He talks about how he was shooting back at some people, and a woman came out and pulled up an AK-47, and he said, "I didn't hesitate about shooting her, but that stuck with me. I was raised in a very old-fashioned sort of way. You don't hurt women. You don't do that. That's one thing that stuck with me for a long, long time."
That's something that's definitely in the books.
Yes, right.
Like 100% that feeling of do not hurt women. That's definitely in a lot of the characters.
It's in the books a lot,
Yeah.
especially with Rand and Matt. Rand, Matt, and Perrin
Perrin
specifically.
too. Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
three of them specifically, but I think
Yeah.
Rand maybe the most. And
Rand, yeah. I
I
mean,
kind of, I don't know if this is from one of his interviews, I think so. This probably was out there, but it's not something I don't know if I knew specifically about. But I kind of always suspected that that was like Robert Jordan's do it, like his kind of philosophy of like, or the
yeah.
way he was raised.
Right.
So yeah, that kind of stuck or
Yeah.
struck
I
me.
mean, that's a common way to feel. I feel like from even today, it still is.
Mhm.
But just that feeling of like specifically a woman dying because of him or whatever, like definitely correlates right exactly to Rand.
Yeah, I mean, this is almost like therapy for him, right? Writing, so he's
Yeah.
kind of getting that out
Right.
there in his characters, some of the stuff that or the trauma he's experienced and is having trouble dealing with, and he's writing it into his characters to help him deal with it. I think that's definitely a direct correlation. That just kind of stuck out at me. Um, Tom, you mentioned about his decision to write, how he was just reading one day and he was like, I can write better than this. And he wrote that book that was just released not too long ago, right? A year or two ago, The Warrior of the Altai.
Yeah.
That was the
Right.
book that he wrote. I didn't have any idea like about that. And that kind of what led him to meet Harriet, which I thought was also an interesting story. I never knew this story about how he met Harriet. I also didn't know Harriet was like 10 or 11 years older than him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had no idea. By the way, Robert Jordan, born the same year as my dad. He's about like 3 weeks older than my dad, or almost a month older than my dad. No, I didn't know that.
There you go. Yeah, that's the thing that like he died so young.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was
You
very
know?
young.
He died so young.
Yeah. So about this meeting, how he met Harriet and how they kind of became, you know, into a relationship and then eventually marrying him. I'm not going to go through the whole story, but I was again wondering if there was any particular part about it that kind of struck either of you.
There was at least one part, if not two, where like he overheard her saying that she wanted a specific type of book, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm working on that right now." And then
Oh,
he just like go home and come up. Well, one of them was like a bodice ripper.
the bodice ripper, sexy historicals aimed
yeah.
at a female audience. First of all,
That yeah. There was another one that he overheard her saying nobody wants to write a historical novel about South Carolina that doesn't involve the Civil War.
yeah,
Like he literally heard her saying it as he was walking up to the house, and then he went in and was like, "Oh, I happen to be working on this historical novel that doesn't involve
takes place
the
in the
Civil War."
Revolutionary War.
Yeah, he was just doing that thing where he said like, if somebody asks you if you could do something, you say yes, and you figure it out later.
Yeah, he talked about
Of
like
course
the
you can ride a
actors.
horse.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
that- yeah.
I could do that.
Born on one.
Yeah. The bodice ripper. First of all, I love that term, bodice rippers.
Yeah.
Like, because I was just picturing like women reading the book and they're just ripping open their bras because.
No, that's not why. Isn't
No.
it like the guy ripping open the girl's bodice in the story?
I complete.
Yeah, it's not how. It's not.
It's not like,
private
oh my
parts.
god, this book is so good. To rip my clothes off.
I took it as the
No.
way as the women were reading the book and they got really turned on and
No.
they felt the need that they had to touch
No,
themselves.
the man rips the woman's bodice
the
off her
book.
dress while they're doing it.
Oh boy,
Yeah.
I took that totally
Pick-
different.
Very
Picture-
sexily, because he's so strong, he just rips the cloth right in half.
Yeah,
But-
picture like Fabio book covers
Right,
from
right.
like
No,
the
I know
90s
I
and
know
80s.
exactly what kind of books they're talking about. Well, actually, I don't know exactly what kind of books because it's bodice rippers, sexy historicals. Is that like
Yeah,
a thing?
like
Sexy
Outlander.
historicals? Oh yeah, I guess
Yeah,
like
Outlander.
Outlander
I was
is a
gonna say that,
bodice
right?
ripper.
Outlander, yeah. Oh man.
Sexy historicals. I
I've
was
never
like,
heard them referred to as sexy historicals.
Dean's digging at me. Oh my god, I rather picture it my way, where a woman's reading this book and she's
I mean,
just
it could
so
be-
turned on
can't-
that she
it
just
could be
rips
both.
off her clothes.
It could be both, Joe.
I'm just, when you say that, I'm picturing the scene from Private Parts where the girl's sitting on the speaker.
Oh. Oh boy,
Oh,
that's
man.
so funny.
That's awesome. Didn't it involve a duck? Is
A
that
duck or something, yeah.
right? Like the
Oh yeah, that was the other line.
Duck in the
She
sea.
mentions that she doesn't remember. So he wrote the book, right? He wrote the Bodice Ripper, but but it wasn't really good. And she mentions, Harriet says that she doesn't really remember anything except that during the obligatory sex scene that there was a duck involved.
Popo was just like in the background or next to them.
I don't know. It wasn't a prop
But
as part
Howard the
of the.
Duck?
I
Like,
don't know.
There you go.
It was
oh my
historical
God.
fiction, I guess. I also didn't know because I'm bad. I'm bad. I'm a bad Wheel of Time fan and Robert Jordan fan. But he wrote a trilogy about the. We talked about the Jen. You mentioned it, the South Carolina, but
Yeah.
taking place in the Revolutionary War. He wrote a trilogy
Yeah.
about that apparently were successful. I guess I'm gonna have to go look those up and read them.
Are those are the ones that are under Robert Jordan?
No, no. The Robert Jordan was for Conan.
Oh,
Reagan
oh, the
O'Neill.
Conan books. Okay,
I
okay,
think he might have wrote them under Reagan O'Neill.
okay.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. And then he wrote the Conan books, the Conan books, which were also very
Conan.
successful. I never read any of those books, but I heard they're actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, I'm stuck on the bodice rippers. Totally off track and lost it. Yeah. So, also then they go to talk about um his disease, and how he was determined to live much longer than the doctors gave him, and he said he was gonna finish his books, and then at one point got to a point where he was like, I want all my notes destroyed after I died, but then kind of was like, no, we got to finish this, and he was talking about the last days where he was. They were taking notes at bedside. He was writing at bedside. He had the computer in his bed, and then Maria went out and bought a tape recorder and was recording him dictating the last scenes of the book. And she, something that kind of was, I know, kind of got me a little teary eyed, was talking about how she had come up with this list of questions that the fans, not necessarily that fans submitted questions, but things that she knew that the fans were going to ask questions about, and things that she thought needed to be answered or might want to be answered, and how they were working through that list, and then he died and they never got to finish the list, and one of the
Yeah.
questions was, how did Ren light the pipe?
Yeah. Said it was like the next question she was gonna ask him.
Yeah. And I don't. Go ahead, Jen.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. You could finish.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, obviously we all know, like, he passed away. He wasn't able to finish the books, but I never really thought about like how sad it was for him to be going through all this. Besides the fact of like, I'm dying, of like at the beginning how he was so like, no, it's fine. I'm fighting this. Don't worry. And then there was like a moment where he had to come to a realization in himself, like, I'm not finishing these books. Like,
He had to embrace death.
right. Like, it just, I don't know. Just like to put so much work into all, I mean, I don't know. Dying is scary enough, but to know like there's like no way I could finish this. And then it's just like we got to get everything out. I don't know. It must have been, it was very sad. I just
Yeah,
never like really thought about like how sad it was for him and them
'cause he
like
seems
watching
very
him deteriorate.
optimistic, right?
And while, yeah, I mean, everybody, of course, anybody would be at the beginning. You just hope like you could fight it, but yeah, just
Hmm.
very sad.
I wonder
It-
too, like how, right? Because he knew how it was going to end, right? So it wasn't for him, right? He knew how it was going to end. I guess it was more for the fans, and I guess he really, I mean, think about it. Like, he's dying, right? He's got his friends and family around him, and he's dying, and his main focus is to finish the book series for us.
Yeah.
Like, that's what he's really most concerned about.
Well, it's
Which
also
is,
like his life's work too. To
no,
think
I know
like
it's
you
like,
want this to be in the world. At least when you go, there's like, it's not like, oh, remember that author died in the book. Like we never knew what happened at the end. Like
mhm.
at least that there's some like a full, your story is told, you know.
Yeah, I just think
When
that's just
you
like
go.
trying to point out like how selfless he was.
Right.
Like
No, I know.
most people would be like too busy or wrapped up in their own stuff, and he was thinking about like, no, I've got to finish this because everybody wants me to finish this story. I need to finish this for the fans and for everybody out there.
Yeah.
You know, and what he made, he made Harriet promise that she'd find someone to finish the books. I just kept thinking of like this as like a movie, like if they made a movie
Yeah.
about Robert Jordan, thinking like imagining some of these scenes in my head. It would be a pretty crazy cool movie for sure. So I don't know, could be done out there.
It's like a Forrest Gump.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Go from the war, you come back, then the romance, then the novel, then the tragic ending, then the hopeful Brandon coming in at the end to finish it. It's
yeah,
good.
it's a
Uh,
sad
uh,
story.
uh,
Michael Livingston should start working on the screenplay now that he's done with this.
Well, right, everyone's saying like, right, he says he wants to be able to write more books like this, like more books about the Wheel of Time. Um,
yeah. And I mean, that's more. We'll talk about it more, I guess, when we talk about chapter 2. But like addressing it from a scholarly point of view, right? And like really trying to emphasize that this is something beyond, I guess, regular genre fiction. But to jump back to Jordan's death, and um, and bringing Sanderson in. One of the things that I found really revelatory about this book, because Brandon Sanderson has been pretty honest about like, hey, like I wrote, what he had, I kept, and I filled in the gaps, and like we worked together, and like blah blah blah. This really paints a different picture. How like there was nothing. Like he had like isolated, like this might happen. Here's this, here's that, but like there were huge just chunks of storyline and plot that they had to make up on. He had to make up on his own, and it wasn't portrayed like that when the books came out. Right?
no,
It was portrayed like the story was there. He had to write it, but like the plot was there, and there were
Yeah.
elements there, and like it was the two of them writing together. And some scenes were Jordan, and some scenes were Jordan. Then he did a second draft or whatever. And this was much more like I had a list of stuff that needed to happen, and then I didn't even know how it was going to get from point A to point B.
yeah,
And like I, to me, like all the cool stuff that we're going to get in the glossary portion of this series, and all the cool stuff that we'll get in later chapters in this book, like that alone was worth the price of this book, to kind of find out like what the making of those last 3 books was really like, and how it was like more of a creative effort from Brandon Sanderson than I think was portrayed originally. Like getting the behind the scenes of that
hmm
was something that I was really surprised about, and that's with Michael Livingston saying beforehand, "Hey, I got permission to say everything. Like I didn't think that they would let me say some of the stuff that I wrote in here,
hmm
and they let me write it all. But I didn't think it was going to be like this, to kind of pull the curtain back on that, because like if you go back to look at interviews or things that were written around the times of those books, it was really like, hey, Jordan wrote a lot before he
Yeah.
passed, and I'm just filling in the blanks. Like I'm just, I'm there to pick up. Like it's not like this portrays it like there was nothing. It's
yeah.
really a different thing.
And I imagine they did that for the benefit of the fans or the
Yeah.
readers, that they
Yeah.
didn't, because they didn't want, or they might also, but they probably were also protecting Brandon as well. Like they don't want people
Yes.
backlash to go on him if they didn't like stuff. So let's just say, Robert Jordan wrote most of this stuff. But yeah, you're right. He mentions in this, in talking with Brandon, that like there were scenes that Robert Jordan just flat out wrote and he didn't touch them. Brandon was like, nope, I'm not touching
Right.
these. These are in the book and I'm not touching them. But there was a ton of stuff that just he had to make it all up himself. He came up with a lot of that stuff, and he would go back to, and he had the great support system. He had Robert Jordan's wife and editor. So, I mean,
Right.
that's a huge, awesome resource because she's editing the book anyway, and she knows, she knows what's got to go in and or how it's got to go, or at least the feel of it. And then you've got Maria and Alan there as well, who are just like, organizing notes and providing continuity and character, histories and things like that. So I imagine like that made it somewhat easier for Brandon, where he didn't feel like he was kind of making it up on his own, but he did. He had to make up stuff on his own.
It was funny when he said, like, there was a lot of stuff in the previous books, like notes he had written that he ended up not using.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some stuff for the last 3 books that they were like, do we have to use it all? Like maybe he would have ended up not using it, and now we have to guess like which way he would have gone. So it's like you don't have to use all the notes. Now you have to pick and choose from what he wrote, so which is even harder.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of I remember Livingston when he said he was going through the notes, like a lot of the notes aren't even dated. So he doesn't know like at what point, like,
Right.
was this first? Did Robert Jordan think this first and then think this next and then came to the book? So like, I can't imagine like Maria and Alan like trying to organize the notes for Brandon and then like giving them to him, being like, hey, this is what we got. And just trying to make sense. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of notes. It's insane. And something else too, I guess, talking just a little bit about Robert Jordan's writing process that they mentioned was like they talked about like basically his schedule for writing. Like in the beginning of the books, he would basically do like a 9 to 5 kind of thing in his office, and then as he got deeper into them, he was like 12, 14 hours would spend a day writing. But he talked about like how many, or I think it was either him or Harriet talking about how many drafts he would do of chapters, like 13, 14, 15 drafts. I can't imagine that. I mean, I'm not a writer, but that seems like a lot to me.
Yeah. I don't even
Yeah.
like doing 2 drafts. Like, this is good. It's fine.
I wanted to also just talk. We're still all in chapter 1, but I wanted to talk a little bit about chapter 2, which is I forgot. I didn't even say the titles of the chapter. So the first chapter was titled "The Wheelwright: The Life of Robert Jordan," and then we get into the second chapter, which is "The Axle and the Wheel: Tolkien and Jordan." And this, I wasn't expecting this chapter, or I knew there was a biography part of it, but this was interesting to me. This chapter, and it talks about fantasy in general, just like the fantasy genre, and it talks a lot about Tolkien, obviously, who's kind of like the godfather of fantasy. But he kind of he goes into this about like linguistics, and he says he talks a lot about philology in this, which is literally means the love of learning, and he talks about the similarities between Jordan and Tolkien, about how they kind of create their stories and their worlds. And he uses the example of like for Tolkien, like it would be a word, one word, and just like digging into like the origins of that word and then kind of develop it into a whole background or story or history or something like that, or a mythos for his stories. And that Jordan wrote in a similar way. Like they built their worlds, while their writing styles are different, but the way they built their stories and their worlds were very similar, and it was unlike any other fantasy writers that had written in between them. And that's kind of like a strong connection between the two of them. And I thought this was really fascinating, and just talking about how they would pull things right from real life, which is we talked a bit about that, and that's a lot of what this book is about. But it was never directly like, Matt is Loki, Rand is Arthur. It's always pieces of different mythologies and real life parallels, never just like a straight 1-to-1 correlation, which I thought was really interesting and cool. I don't know. I know, Jen, you were kind of not as gung-ho about this chapter, but was there anything in it particular, though, that kind of did fascinate you or jump out at you um, about it, or why you think even Livingston put this in here.
I'm gonna look at it again really quick because I'm not sure. I didn't write
Yeah,
anything
he talks.
down.
He's talking about the word, like words specifically, and
Yeah.
he starts. There's like Old English bits in here, and he's talking
Yeah,
about
that
like
was
the
cool.
origins
Where it
of
was like,
words.
this is how it was, this what does he say? 1,000 years ago. This is what it looked like 600 years ago, and how the words are just like you can't even understand them at all. They're like gibberish.
Yeah, like he says, like it's basically there's sections in it called like how Tolkien did it, and then how Jordan did it. And
Yeah,
then
and then yeah, the language stuff I actually really liked, which was how like there was some kind of language called Proto-Indo-European,
mhm,
which ended up being like the core language where like most other languages came from, which I just always assumed was Latin because that's where we get a lot of our words from, but it looks like there was like an even older language that fed into all these different languages.
yeah, I think too that
Was
kind of Livingston also kind of points out how like a lot of Tolkien was, based on his. He talks. I'm sorry. He talks about how Tolkien's world is our world, right? It's just a story
right.
told long ago, and he says like
Mm,
Jordan's was the same way. Jordan wrote the same way. Like these aren't other worlds or other dimensions or other places. This is our world, just at another point in time.
yeah. Well, like uh he said Tolkien's was like a linear time,
Mhm.
and
Right.
obviously Jordan was a wheel. I just can't find it in here right now, but there was something about how Tolkien just wrote down like the first line of The Hobbit like randomly one day and then was thinking like, where did that even come from? Like it just came out of his pen or whatever and onto the paper, and
Yeah,
then like, what is this word? Hobbit, Then he just like created everything from that. It's insane.
That
yeah. That's why
and
I found so fascinating about this chapter
Yeah.
was just like the way their writing methods and how they created their stories and where they drew how they drew upon. They I think that one of the differences he mentioned between Jordan and um, and Tolkien was that Jordan kind of took from a lot of different cultures, whereas I think Tolkien maybe wasn't so
Yeah.
diverse in the cultures that he drew from. Um,
well, yeah, and I think that there's twofold reason for that. So one, it's on purpose, right? Jordan, Tolkien specifically intended to write a mythology for Britain, Great Britain,
I think he
because
says
it
like
didn't
Western
have one.
Europe or yeah,
Well, it involved all the peoples of Western Europe, but
yeah.
like it was designed to be like to give England a mythology, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and England is England, and it's old Europe, whatever. But America is everybody, right? America is a melting pot, and so um, I really love like I've heard, on the backs of the covers of the books, like he's the American Tolkien, and um, I always read that as like he's an American who's writing the next epic fantasy, but Michael Livingston really addresses it in a way of like, no, like he is how an American would approach writing a fantasy world in that model, where you're not going to only pull from, you know, the the white Anglo-Saxon Christian
Mhm.
Celtic
Mm-hmm.
myth, and like, but you're going to pull from everywhere because we have everything here,
Yeah.
and that he spent time in the East and he has, experienced a lot of cultural things from that area that you don't see here, necessarily. So that he even had an expanded mindset from his time in Vietnam, and obviously the show is, I think, doubled down or really chosen to heavily emphasize the Eastern philosophical influences on it on the series. But yeah, I think that I don't know. Like I found that there was like I really, really enjoyed a lot of the ways that Michael Livingston approached this chapter. I think that you could tell like this is like, this is where he comes from. Yeah, he always his Twitter handle's medieval guy, right? And he's like
Yeah,
this is his
he
area of
mentions how
expertise.
Tolkien was professor of medieval literature, just like him. And
Yeah.
Right. So like, but like the thing that Jen mentioned so many good points. I want to talk about all of them. I'm sorry. Like, like when he did the piece about like, here's what it was like in Canterbury Tales, and here's what it was like in Beowulf, and whatever, and like 1,000 years ago, and 600 years ago, and look at that, and like all I can think about is that some people who don't, I guess, know that, right, find it incredulous that in 3,000 years language could change so much that like the old tongue is just different, no one can understand it, and
Yeah.
here's like hundreds of years later and it's not, nothing makes sense, right? um and I find that was a really good object lesson to show like language changes so much quicker than you can understand, that here's something in English 600 years ago, you don't know what half the words mean, right? Or how to pronounce them or anything. I don't know. And then one last thing, sorry, sort of
go ahead.
admin what Jen said. I had heard the story about Tolkien with the Hobbit line, like in Hole in the Ground lives a Hobbit, and the fact that he looked at that sentence because he wrote it out of just nowhere, and he's like, "Oh, I wonder what that means," right? And then he wrote a book about it, right? He created a whole world. And again, I always read that in the context of like, I wrote this line, like not paying attention, and it sparked my imagination to create a world, right? That's how I read it. And Michael Livingston paints it in a different way, that he looked at it and he said, why did I write that word Hobbit?
Yeah.
Where could that have come from? Like, what does that mean? And like, it's more of like taking an academic approach to like, what was I thinking about? What other things influenced me to make that word choice?
And then, like,
And then
yeah,
building the world out from there.
It's also like kind of Wheel of Timey, because it's like that existed already. And it was like he just wrote it, and he like it happened already that the Lord of the Rings was like a thing. And he wrote it. He's like, what is this Hobbit? And then he like just brought it into our world. Like it already happened
he
before.
discovered his.
Yeah, he
It's
discovered
like,
like an old story that already was, and now he's just like retelling it for us, and it
so
just came through him.
so while I'm not a writer, I have written music before, and that's what it's like sometimes when you write music. It almost feels like you're discovering something that already existed. Sometimes I've had that experience before writing songs. So I imagine that's exactly what you're saying. I think,
Yeah.
Jen, is like sometimes, and I imagine writers might have this experience too when they're writing. It almost feels like it's there already, and you're just putting it down on paper. It was just
Yeah.
waiting to be written down and shared with the world. So I get that. I can actually relate to that, because I've had that feeling before. Um, I wanted to go back to Tom, what you were saying about bringing in the different cultures. Livingston uses a great example, and how Robert Jordan just didn't say, okay, we talked about this plenty of times on this show about like how this culture, like this country, Kyrien is not French, but it draws upon French, but there's also other things in there. And like Robert Jordan loved to do that. He loved to blend cultures together to make a new culture and pull different aspects of the cultures. And there's a great example Michael Livingston gives in there, and there's pictures of it, and he talks about the dragon mark katana. And then he's also got another sword, the sword of the Black Prince. And he talks about, then he's got a picture of the replica heron mark blade that was actually made to Robert Jordan's specifications, and how the heron mark blade has aspects of both of those types of swords, and how Jordan blended the Eastern culture with the more Western culture of weapons, and then created this other weapon, which I thought was a great like analogy for the whole thing, for everything. It's like a microcosm of Robert Jordan's, the way he wrote and the way he built worlds was this. So I really thought that was cool, and I love how he put pictures in there for us too.
Yeah. It was, I
Sure.
think it was in this chapter, but I'm not sure where it just was talking about how he researched like different trees that would be in like a certain location, and then like, but not only did he know like what the tree was called, but like he wanted to know what like what color the leaves would be and what time of year, and like what did the bark feel like if you touched it, you know? Like
Yes.
that's like
Right.
stuff you like, it's so in depth down to like the tiniest little detail. It's like really insane.
Yeah,
You want to
it's
have that there.
and I imagine this
Like,
is
yeah.
part of his notes, I guess. Like I can
Yeah, that's probably
imagine him
why the
having
notes
like
are so long.
right
Like
pages of
here's
notes
the
of just
tree.
like trees, right? Like that
Yeah, like
grew in
what
a
if I have, what if I want to have a character lean on a tree? Like what are they gonna feel?
how do I
And then you have to
describe
like
it?
know that, right? It's just, oh my
I'm
God.
I'm I'm
Crazy.
I'm almost wondering. I don't know if anyone's. I'm sure obviously people know this, but I could just imagine like Robert Jordan having tons of different clothing in his writing area because of
Yeah.
all the descriptions of clothing
Yeah, everything.
that he's had, or unless he's just got lots of pictures of clothing. But yeah, I forgot about that, Jen. That was really cool. That's like how in depth like he was like, okay, what kind of trees are in this country? Let me go find
Yeah.
out what kind of trees grow in that type of climate and what
Right.
color leaves they have. Are they broad leaves? Are they thin leaves? Do the leaves fall off in the winter? What does the bark feel like? And that so he could write all that into the story.
Yeah.
It's insane.
So, I mean, one other thing that they talk about in this chapter that jumped out at me, and it jumped out at me for a cheesy reason, but whatever. Um, so Tolkien is also somebody who was in war and had his experience in war influenced the way he wrote. Right, Tolkien was in World War I, was in the trenches, right, was on the Western Front, um, and and it reminded me of a comic book. Um, there was a period of time years ago where like there's a comic book and Captain America was thought to have died, and the Punisher. I'm reaching over my shoulder for people watching, right? Because I have a Kevin Williamson poster behind me. The Punisher tried to take his spot and like change his ways and live up to be Captain America, right? But Captain America was born in World War II, and it was a different time, and there were clear good guys and bad guys, and whatever that case may be. And the Punisher was in Vietnam, and like fundamentally, even though there are some parallels about signing up, protect, believing in your country, going to war, etc., etc., there like those wars change people in different ways. And I think that you also see that in the way Tolkien was influenced by World War I versus the way Jordan was influenced by World War by the Vietnam War versus some of the other writers that they kind of mentioned in a period in this thing about like other great writers of the 20th century who were influenced by World War II, like Vonnegut or or Joseph Heller or anybody like that. Like it's just the kind of chaos of a nihilism of battle and the fact that um like I don't know, it's not as simple as good triumphing over evil and destroying evil, right? Because
Hmm.
like that's not what it's really about or whatever. Like I found that really fascinating. Like um I found it really fascinating to kind of say like where the parallels were and where the differences
Mm-hmm.
were and how the times that you were raised in and the times that you experience kind of, even though they're the same kind of a thing, can impact you in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
There's just one more thing I wanted to bring up too, and then if you guys want to bring up anything else, so we can wrap it up. Jen had touched on it before. She talked about the difference, the one difference, or another difference between Tolkien and Jordan was the the time, the way they wrote about time, and Livingston goes into there and talks about like the A theory of time, which is the linear theory of time, which is how
Hmm.
Tolkien wrote, and then the B theory of time, which is um, how Jordan wrote, where the past, present, and future are all equally real and happening at the same time, and the cyclical nature of the wheel, um, and how he kind of wove that into his story. Nope, no, my double entendre there. Um, um, and how this story is taking place in our past, present, and future all at the same time because time is a circle, and he talks about a wheel and how like no matter if no matter which direction you go on a wheel, you're always going to end up back where you started. which I thought was cool a little bit, just getting into a little bit of the backstory and a little bit of the origins of those two theories of time, which clearly are a huge, important part of Robert Jordan's books, and how that's kind of more of an Eastern philosophy, as you mentioned, Tom, being over in Vietnam, like being exposed to the different types of philosophies and culture. And I think he talks about, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead or if it was in this chapter, where he did talk a little bit about right and wrong in Western cultures, but in Eastern cultures, it's not that's not what they kind of focus on in their philosophies and religious beliefs. Maybe that might be in the next chapter.
I don't remember that.
It's in the
Yeah,
next
I'm
chapter.
sorry. I think I'm jumping ahead. Sorry about that. We'll talk about that next week. Is there anything else you guys wanted to talk about in these first two chapters? Wow. We really dug in there good.
What are we doing? Just chapter 3 next week?
Yeah, we'll do chapter 3 next week.
Okay.
Is there anything else you guys wanted to talk about these chapters before we wrap it up tonight?
I don't think so, no.
I'm good.
I'm good. All right. All right. So next week we'll come back with chapter 3. We're going to have a special guest on next week, friend of the show and Wheel of Time enthusiast and fan and avid reader. You may know her on Twitter as Beth Doman. So we're very excited to have Beth on. She's actually here in chat. Very excited to have Beth on. She's very eager to talk about this book and share her thoughts, which is going to be a real blast. So we're also having some other guests coming up in the coming weeks too. I won't announce who, but you're going to really enjoy them. I'll announce them. I think we'll just announce them before each week, just to keep people in suspense. Fair. But we have guests coming on for the next couple of weeks to talk about this book, because it's pretty awesome. And I can't wait to get to the last chapter, which is the glossary. And we might spend a couple episodes talking about that, depending on how much stuff there is to talk about in there. But I'm sure we could probably talk about the glossary for a long time. All right. So I want to remind everyone to follow us on social media. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And oh, by the way, I created a Mastodon account yesterday or something like that, trying that out.
What is Mastodon?
It's kind of like Twitter, but it's like different servers. So people start their own servers and you join the server and you're just kind of really interacting with people on that server. But
so it's like Discord and Twitter had a baby? Kind of?
But there is interaction with other servers, and you can, I don't know. I'm just really learning
to learn
it.
a whole new
But it
social
kind
media.
of looks like Twitter, from a user interface perspective.
Mr. Mastodon.
I don't know. I saw somebody on Twitter, Time Hybrid Havoc, created a server, Dark Friend Social. So I jumped on there and I saw a few people there that we know. So just playing around with it, seeing what it's like. So I think we're at talk_Aran_Riyadh. It's the same handle as our Instagram. If you're on Mastodon and want to look for us there. Also, join us in Discord to continue the conversation there. Rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts, and check out our merchandise and Patreon pages to support us that way. Links to all the aforementioned information is included in the show notes to this episode. Any last words or thoughts or things you want to share, Tom and Jen?
This will have passed by the time the episode comes out, but Happy Veterans Day.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Tomorrow is Veterans Day.
Tomorrow's Veterans Day. Thank you to all of our veterans who've served and sacrificed for this country.
Especially Robert Jordan and J.R.R. Tolkien.
Well,
he didn't sacrifice for our country, but
yeah,
we can still say thank you to him.
It's only Veterans Day in America, but whatever.
Okay, only Robert Jordan. Only you guys can celebrate Tolkien.
Mox is in chat.
Happy Veterans Day,
Mox.
Yeah,
yes.
we know your brother, Tom, your brother, Vin.
Yep.
Thank you for your service, all of you out there. We really appreciate it.
Oh, Beth.
Beth,
I'm sorry.
Beth too. That's
you.
right. Beth. We should have had Beth on today. Then we could have bathed her or showered her with praise.
Bathed and showered her. Bathe you with praise.
Bathe you with praise. whichever you prefer.
You were on fire tonight, man.
I'm thrown off. It's Thursday. I'm tired because I was in the office these last 2 days. My computer. So quick story I will share. I was having an issue printing at the office. So I called up the IT team to help me out. And the guy couldn't solve the problem, but he was doing all these things to my computer. He hangs up the phone, and then I realized he like totally fucked up my computer. Like I couldn't get email, I couldn't send email, I couldn't access my OneDrive, my OneNote, or Excel, all that stuff was not working. The guy destroyed my computer, made it worse. So then I called them back up. I got a different guy. He tried to fix it, and he's like, I don't know what the hell this guy did. I'm gonna have to call him to try to figure out what he did so I could fix it. He never calls me back. So it's getting later in the day. I'm like, I got to get this fixed because this is driving me nuts. So I called up. Again, I got another person. She got me through it. She fixed my computer. Thank you, Naomi. I thanked her like 100 times. But you saved my computer and you made my day better. So it was kind of a stressful day for me. So I'm a little off.
Oh, man.
But yeah. So happy Veterans Day, everybody. This episode is going to release on my wife's birthday. Happy birthday to my father, which is on... Oh, I forgot. Yesterday was our friend Dave's birthday. I forgot to text him. I have to text him. Saturday's my father's birthday. Jen, happy anniversary. It's your anniversary too, right? On Saturday.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of fun stuff, like sitting at home doing nothing.
Yeah.
Should be great. But thank you.
I did my last few anniversaries. That's right.
And happy birthday to my wife. When this episode releases, it will be her birthday. So.
Saturday.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening, and you'll hear us next time.